What's going on, YouTube world? My name is Adam Eisenberg, and I'm very happy today to introduce my guest, a man that I have extreme respect for, a fellow 9/11 truther and whistleblower. His name is Captain Dan Hanley. Captain Dan is a retired civilian, military, and commercial airline pilot of 35 years. He's married to a Pakistani woman, and he has lived in Islamabad, Pakistan for the past 11 years. And he currently serves as director and international public spokesperson for a global grassroots effort called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers, whose website is at 911pilots.org, and the YouTube channel is at 9/11 Pilots. I could say so much more, but I'm going to let this man take it over. Dan, such an honor. I can't tell you how much I appreciate sharing this space with you, buddy.
Well, thank you for having me on, Adam. I appreciate that nice introduction too. Yes, it's true. I was a pilot my entire working life. I started out flying planes over 50 years ago in 1968. As you mentioned, first as a civilian, where I acquired my private commercial instrument and multi-engine rating by working my way through school by 1970. And I finished college, and then when the Vietnam War was raging and I had to make plans or get drafted. So I chose naval aviation in 1973. I entered training in the Navy, and over the course of the next 10 years, I flew 4 airplanes, and for the most part, flew the P-3 Orion, which is a 4-engine turboprop that's was used to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War. In 1978, I was hired by United Airlines as a pilot. And over the course of the next 25 years, I flew 7 different aircraft, accruing 20,000 flight hours over a 35-year career span. But it ended tragically for me, Adam, because in 2002, I started reporting safety and security issues related to 9/11. And ultimately, I won't go into it because it would take a whole program to discuss it. But they permanently medically grounded me for speaking out. And I fought that issue for 5 or 6 years with every level and branch of government, and I found out just how corrupt the system was. I was kind of naive going into it because I thought we still had some semblance of a government after 9/11, and we didn't.
I was going to say, I've listened to your talks on what you went through, with the unions, with the FAA, within the United Company. Wow. That's incredible, and it's very disappointing. So if you want to expound on that, please do. But I was very surprised to hear about your struggle early on, and then when the psychological evaluations, which were ridiculous, started to happen. Unbelievable.
Well, Adam, I will, if people promise they won't say I'm mentally unstable when I get done with this story, as I've had people say before. I'm glad he's not flying airplanes anymore. But basically what happened was I filed I was getting stonewalled after 9/11, just having normal conversations with company management and my union. And they said, keep your head down. These guys are nasty. If you take it to the next level, you're going to get hurt. The union leader said, watch it, Dan, these guys are nasty. So I persisted, still believing I had a union to back me up and federal aviation regulations as well. And I started filing federal reports, federally mandated reports, and they too were getting stonewalled. So I was going to write the chief executive officer of United Airlines, because we were in bankruptcy at the time. And between the bankruptcy judge and United, they were imposing undue pressure on the union to capitulate. So the union was on the ropes, very limited in their ability to represent my concerns. So I drafted this letter and called my union boss, who I knew. I was real senior at the time. I was like number 200 out of 10,000 pilots. So I knew everybody in management and the union. And I called my union leader in New York and said, Mark, I'm sending this letter to the CEO. He goes, please send it to me first, and I'll forward it to the union lawyers in Chicago. So I agreed to do that, but I said, don't sit on it because this has been going on for a couple of years. So this was the 2003 timeframe.
And this was their failure to really make the planes safe post 9/11, correct?
Well, yeah, that was part of it, but I was also reporting this glitch in the aviation safety reporting system.
Okay.
And I was intimating that it was the pressures exerted by bankruptcy that was causing it to occur. So what I was pointing out was massive holes in the aviation security system, which would prove it was a farce. And they couldn't allow me out on the line flying to be saying the things I was saying. So that was the first thing they did was, well, let me just continue here real quick and I'll try to wrap this up. But a union lawyer and the grievance committee chairman called me on a joint call when I was sitting in the JFK food court with all kind of people around me. So I was limited on what I could say, but I said, did you review the letter? And they said, yes. I said, do you agree with the content? And they said, yes. I said, does it violate Federal Aviation Regulations company policy or the Airline Pilots Association Code of Ethics? They said, no. I said, well, you're my union attorney. What do you represent? What do you suggest that I do? And he said, don't send the letter in. I said, well, wait a minute. I thought you just said you agree with me. And the grievance committee chairman said, go ahead and send that letter in if you never want to fly another United airplane again in your life. So I said, what are they going to do to me? I'm protected by regulations here. And they said, we've seen it happen before. They'll find a way to medically, professionally, or psychologically ground you, but they will ground you for life as a pilot. So let me back up. I had seen this happen before. So 6 months prior to this conversation, I sought out the advice and counseling of the best mental health professionals in the Atlanta area where I was living at the time. And I said, yeah, I said, here's where I am. Here's what I've said. Here's what they're going to try to do to me. I need you to screen me in any way possible to prove I'm psychologically sound so I have it in my record so I can pursue this thing further legally, which they did. So when they told me this, it wasn't a big shock to me that I thought that they would try this, but professionally, I never failed a check ride in my 35-year career. Medically, I never failed a physical or a psychological screening. So I anticipated them going after me on psychological grounds. So rather than send this letter in, I decided I was going to send what they call flight safety awareness reports in, which is not only goes to the company, because these reports I was submitting before were internal to the company, just the management and union got copies of them. But when I filed these flight safety awareness reports, it brought the Federal Aviation Administration in. So I thought, well, I'll nail them on regulations here. I've got them. But as soon as I sent in 6 reports electronically online, my assistant chief pilot called me and said, you've been taken out of schedule. I said, why? I haven't done anything wrong. He goes, you've got to come to New York. Oh, that was the other thing I'd asked the lawyer. How far in can I expect union protection? And he said, not very far. So I knew I was on my own. And I actually tried to get attorneys at this point in time, but no one would represent me because I was going up against a victim airline of 9/11 that was in bankruptcy and was the largest airline in the world. And they said, you won't stand a chance. So I was on my own. And when they said I had to come up to New York, I said, can I bring my own attorney? And they go, no. I said, well, I'm not legally protected here because the union's not going to do it. I can't come up there until we can arrive at a compromise here. Well, long story short, I was still getting paid at the time, even though they had taken me out of schedule. And then about a month into this thing, my chief pilot calls me and said, Dan, I ran into the chief flight surgeon out of Denver, and he asked if you were one of my people in New York. And I told him yes. And he says, I'll tell you, he said, put the son of a bitch on sick list. So I said, Bob, how can they do that without warrant? I haven't seen an aeromedical professional. He goes, my hands are tied on this, Dan. I'm sorry. You're on sick list effective now. Well, you've only got so much sick list on the book. So I was running out of sick list. And I called him back up and said, Bob, this is punitive now. I'm going to go non-pay. And I got overhead expenses just like you. What are my options here? We're at an impasse here. And he goes, well, there's a program called the Employee Assistance Program. Well, I knew what that was. It was for people that were suffering family problems, financial problems, drug or alcohol problems, et cetera, that would impinge upon their ability to work, conduct their job. So I said, I don't fit any of those categories. He goes, yeah, but it's protected by the FAA, the company, and the union. It'll keep your pay coming in. I says, otherwise I'm going to lose it. He goes, yes, you will. So I thought, well, I'll go along with this. And he said, the only stipulation is you have to agree to do everything the company or the aeromedical professionals want you to do. So I thought, okay, I'll go along with this because at this point in time, I'd been recording phone conversations and also had a long correspondence trail and witnesses too. So I went up to Chicago, met with the flight surgeon up there, and the first thing he asked was, would I be willing to see a mental health professional? I said, well, I knew you were going to ask that. So he says, I said, sure. So there were two other pilots in the room with me at the time, and they said, we'll take you over there. Well, I thought I was going over to a doctor's office, and it turned out it was a mental health facility, an insane asylum. And I went in, it was Alexian Brothers Behavioral Health Hospital. It was a Christian facility, right? So I went in, checked at the front desk, and a psychologist, a nun, a Catholic nun came up, took us to a room. I spent about an hour trying to explain to her, here's why I'm here, but I wasn't getting through to her. Well, she said to me after an hour, look, I'm only a psychologist. They want you to see a psychiatrist. So we can arrange, it was late in the day and I'd gotten up at 4 a.m. So she says, we can arrange for you to have a room and see a psychiatrist first thing in the morning and then you'll be out of here. So I said, okay, I got to go along with what they're saying. Big mistake, but I said, okay. So I agreed. And the first clue I had that I had made a mistake was we went up to the check-in desk upstairs and they locked the door behind me and then asked me to take off my shoes, my belt, and relinquish all my personal belongings. Like there was something wrong with me, and I thought I was going to get a private room. They escorted me down the hall to a co-ed wing and told me, look, check beneath your bed and your bathroom because female patients try to come in and molest you. And I went, well, I'm just going to lock my door. And she goes, you can't, we got to come in and check on you at night. So I was escorted into a room where a paranoid schizophrenic, very ill patient was.
Oh no.
And, yeah. So anyhow, they said, we want you to come down and take sleep medication. I go, I don't want to. I'm dragging this out and I'll try to wrap it up.
Oh,
Long
no,
story.
I know this story. This is important that people hear this.
Okay. So they insisted I go take sleep medication. I thought, okay, I'll go along with their program here. I took 2 pills. It was like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I had to stand in line with a long group of people, open my tongue to make sure I swallowed the pills, etc. And went back to the room. And at 4 a.m. in the morning, I woke up on the floor in the dark, and there were nurses and a doctor surrounding me. And I'm hearing them say things like, his blood pressure is 60/40. And I genuinely thought I was dying at the time when my blood pressure that low. But supposedly the medication I took, I got up to use the bathroom and passed out. And the next day they ran me for a physical just to cover their butts. So the first day I didn't see a psychiatrist. They came in and said, look, we want you to take these tests. Well, I'd already taken the test with my Atlanta mental health professionals, but I did anyhow. But I had to have meals with some very sick people and participate in group therapy sessions, which I didn't really contribute very much to.
So it sounds to me like they were doing everything they could to paint a narrative that you were losing it.
Exactly. So I'll skip the first night there because a guy came down the hall, tried to convince me to drop what I was doing as I'll read the book. But the next day I finally see a psychiatrist. She comes in now, mind you, I'm sure you're familiar with bipolar disorder, right?
Sure.
Swings of manic and then depression. Okay. Sure. I had been completely congenial and mild-mannered and everything else while I was there. So this psychiatrist comes in and we chatted friendly for a few minutes. As well, I've been here a few days and I'm not going to play this game anymore. What's your diagnosis? She goes, I'm going to say you're bipolar. Well, I almost laughed, I said, well, I got mental health professionals in Atlanta that will beg to differ with your diagnosis, and I'll take it up there. Well, when I got out, they let me out. And I found out afterwards that if you submit yourself to a mental health facility in Illinois, they can keep you to 5 days. So I was lucky to get out after a couple days. And then I discovered the skids were already greased. They had already talked to union consultant in Denver who was a doctor, a psychiatrist, right? Who had already talked with the FAA and the company, and they were going to run me off the property. And I thought, okay, well, I'll fight it on the outside. Well, like I said, I did, but I lost. I took it to every president, attorney general, my state U.S. attorney, senator, and congressman, Homeland Security, Justice Department, Transportation Department, FAA, and was stonewalled at every turn. So it completely turned my stomach and my attitude towards the U.S. government. But what I wound up doing was I was married at the time, a 27-year marriage. It destroyed that. It alienated my two kids who blame me for the divorce, still believe the official story, think I'm a whacked out conspiracy nut, and they don't talk to me. It destroyed a 35-year aviation career and my reputation as a pilot. And I lost about $4 million in pay, pension, and stock as a result of me just trying to be honest and believing that I had a government out there that would protect me in this situation. And we can get into it in a minute, but I'm in the same predicament with this organization that I represent. So you have any questions or comments, Adam?
Well, I do. I remember two things that I heard, one of which, and all those, different things that happened. I remember I was listening to a talk you gave, and you had mentioned that I believe even the people that you were your coworkers, your friends, these people that you've gotten to know and flown with, they were told to basically put a wall up.
Right.
You and them.
Right. My good friend Bob Falco in New York called me one night and said, Dan, and he was a professional standards chairman. Okay. And he says, Dan, we just got word the union put out everyone's to break off all communications with Dan Hanley. And so all my people that I thought were friends ran away from me when I was in this situation. I even tried to contact them and said, look, will you agree to serve as a witness? And they wouldn't. So if you want to know the details of what happened, we'll get into the website in a minute. But there's an About Dan Hanley page. And if you scroll to the bottom of that page, I just put a film on there today, but there's a couple of one's an audio recording, the other one's a film I did with Jason Goodman in New York. It was an interview. And lastly, there's an affidavit down there that goes into great detail that every person I mentioned that I tried to contact got a copy of that affidavit and read exactly, and it was signed, sworn, notarized, and they ignored it. So,
and I was going to say, you have written everybody. I mean, everybody, the president, FAA, every alphabet soup mafia organization, the FBI. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody out there, to my knowledge, that you haven't written about this. and I checked it even a little while ago on your website. Crickets, not a single one of them has said or done anything, given you any response. Is that correct?
That's correct. And 3 years later, and we're going to get into the uninterruptible autopilot, but I had a Northwest DC-10 captain named Field McConnell. I contacted him because I heard he was in the same predicament I was, and he was trying to report illegal modifications on Boeing aircraft. Okay. And it involved this uninterruptible autopilot we'll talk about. Well, they had already taken him out of schedule, and we're trying to get him out to LA to see this notorious FAA quack shrink named Dr. James Elliott to do the same thing that happened to me. And I said, Phil, don't go, it's a setup. So he wound up retiring 9 years early, and he lost about $4 million in pay doing that. But the reason he did it, he didn't want a marred psychological record so he could serve as an expert witness in future litigation. So I'm not the only one, and I could go into detail about a whole bunch of other people, but this is modus operandi for the FAA and companies. If they want to get rid of a dissident employee, this is how they do it. So
yeah, and it doesn't surprise me. And when I started on my journey, I knew it was going to cost me. I've been saying what I've been saying. For those of you who are relatively new to this, I was a first responder at the Pentagon. A lot of you guys know this, but just the resistance that you have met, and it's cost you the job. I took a step back. I had a real estate company. And then now I'm focusing on a little job that it pays the bills. It's nothing serious. I can go in and check out and, get things done, and I don't have to take it home with me. But it's another thing to lose a pension. It's another thing to lose a job. And so, I can't stress it to you enough, just how much respect I have for you and just maintaining the course. I would say that everything that you faced, every trial that you've faced, was only preparing you for what you're going to eventually face down the road. And that's a shift in this paradigm. I think that we have finally found ourselves in a place, and I've been saying the types of things I've been saying for a long time, but we finally found ourselves in a place where people are listening. And I don't know if you've noticed that as well. I've been saying what I was saying for quite some time, and it was always met with just, kind of glazed eyes, like, the conspiracy theorists sort of talk.
Right.
But people are starting to really wake up to the reality of our government and the world's governments, and just the dirty, corrupt organizations that lie within them. And so like I said before, I have nothing but respect for you. But you kind of were mentioning, transitioning right along, unless you had anything else to say. The website. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I would like to get into. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the address on it is 911pilots.org. And if anybody wants to tune into that right now, I'll be going over some of the items on it. And we got a YouTube channel, it's got about 40 videos on it called 911 Pilots. So anyhow, the name of our organization is 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers, and it's comprised of pilots and members of the general public globally, as you mentioned. And the purpose of our organization is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked through employment of a system called the uninterruptible autopilot that I mentioned, that takes complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computer and guides the aircraft to its target. Now, once this system is engaged, the pilots can no longer disconnect it. They're along for the ride. So the goal of our organization is to recruit as many highly qualified civilian and military, both active and retired pilots from around the world, who will attest on film as to the impossibility of the hijackers having flown the flight profiles that day, and that they were not qualified on the aircraft and had lacked the experience to do it. And these pilots are testifying they couldn't have flown the profiles themselves. So on the website homepage, we give an example, and it's your home ground, Adam. It's the Pentagon profile flown by a 29-year-old Saudi Arabian hijacker named Hani Hanjour. Now, we'll get into his credentials a little bit later, but if we've got time. But the airplane took off from Dulles Airport in Washington, got to cruise altitude for a while, and then turned around and headed back towards the Pentagon in a descent. And at 7,000 feet, the aircraft commenced 330-degree or 270, depending on what you read, corkscrew turn, descending and accelerating to arrive precisely at the surface without skidding it, to strike the Office of Naval Intelligence at over 500 knots. Now, this exact profile descent was replicated in a simulator and flown by highly experienced pilots, and they crashed the simulator every time they tried. And yet we're led to believe, or we're expected to believe, that this pilot did this on his first attempt. Well, I'll mention one thing here. 1 month prior to 9/11, he tried to rent a single engine Cessna 172 from the Freeway Airport in Maryland, and they wouldn't rent it to him because he couldn't handle the airplane. So the whole story is absurd, really. But what we've done is we've linked up with another group I'll briefly describe. And if you've already discussed the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 inquiry on other programs, I won't go into it. But a group of lawyers in the United States got together with the biggest 9/11 whistleblowers in the world, and they compiled 57 evidence packages and presented them to the U.S. Attorney in New York, Jeffrey Berman, forcing him to convene a grand jury investigation into their allegations that World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7, and yes, there was a third building that came down that day, collapsed due to controlled demolition and not jet aircraft impact damages and the fuel fires that ensued. So where that is right now, the Department of Justice, FBI, and an organization called the National Institute for Standards and Technology are stonewalling them to the point where the grand jury, they can't determine whether it's commenced or not, and they're very secretive, and the Justice Department won't let that information out. But they're having to go to court, taking this thing all over. They're going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, trying to force the Department of Justice to do this. So it's
Well, I
not
got to
if
tell you, I knew that there was an effort. I didn't know to what extent that effort was together, but I will say this. The head of the Pentagon cleanup, Lee Wheelbarger, I have him on record making a lot of provable lies. And so after this, if it's possible to get linked up to anybody in that organization, I would be happy to share everything that I have on that man, because that man's mentioned in the 9/11 Commission report. He is basically the man that spent more time on site than any human being. And like I said, I've got him hours upon hours of lies. And the beautiful thing about it is it's his words. And I just put out pictures and I show just how crazy it is. But I don't know, I just want to throw that out there. Anybody you might know in that organization and in the lawyers movement, I would love to speak with them anytime.
I know all of them because 2 years ago they said, "Look, you're in the dugout, and back burner item right now because we're dealing with this, and they're also dealing with the anthrax letter issue that happened after 9/11." So they said to me, "Look, we can't publicly endorse what you're saying. We got to remain neutral at this point in time. But if you can come up with enough pilot testimony where we can get a deposition on them, we'll consider gathering evidence and presenting it to a U.S. attorney to try to convene a grand jury investigation." Well, I'm not too optimistic of going that route because of their track record so far. But as far as the members, I know all the board members. Did I email introduce you to Barbara Honegger?
You did, and I tried to write Barbara. I haven't heard back from her, but that doesn't deter me. I'm like Andrew Dufresne in
Yeah,
Shawshank Redemption. I just keep writing. So
yeah,
I'll cross
yeah.
paths there eventually.
She would be the one because she did a presentation. It's on YouTube. It's called "Behind the Smoke Curtain," and it's all about the Pentagon issue. So she would be the person that you should keep trying to contact.
Very
Adam.
good presentation, by the way. Over 3 hours long. Really good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Lawyers Committee, I said the biggest whistleblowers in the world, they got together with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, scientists for 9/11 Truth, police, firemen, William Rodriguez, if you know who he is, and other whistleblowers, including a 4-year study done by the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, that conclusively shows that World Trade Center Building 7 was brought down by controlled demolition. And all this information the government's ignoring. So what the Lawyers Committee is doing now is they're creating a film, and they're going to present all their evidence on film, hoping it'll get to the jurists on the grand jury, and they will see what it is that they have, because it's a slam dunk. Because I've looked at the evidence packages, and to be truthful, there's no way in hell the U.S. government can allow this thing before a grand jury.
I'll tell you, I've got to talk to these guys. Not only did I spend approximately 240 hours on site, I think I might have mentioned to you before, but I also worked for Pratt & Whitney. As a pilot, you know who Pratt & Whitney is.
Right.
There were two companies that fabricated the engines that were on the Boeing 757. Of course, the one that was allegedly on the plane that hit the Pentagon was by Rolls-Royce. That was the other manufacturer of the plane, or excuse me, the engines. But I work for Pratt & Whitney. And so I lean heavily on that experience. The pictures, of course, and I'm not trying to steer this into like a Pentagon talk, but yeah, the pictures where I lean, like I said, is just, you're not going to find anything that even remotely looks like any engine damage. Where Lee Wheelbarger really shot himself in the foot is he specifically points out specific spots on the Pentagon and says, that is where that engine hit. And I can show people that marking is a chemical remnants from what the firefighters were spraying. And then that man also gave this tall tale about how he dug the other engine out personally. And I'm like, dude, engines weigh over 8 to 10,000 pounds. They're 7 feet, in diameter. They're 16 plus feet long. But that's the problem. A lot of people don't understand just how big these planes are and their parts.
Right.
And so
Right.
they can't conceive. But yeah, I would love to give them what I've got, because in his own words, I've got him saying some crazy stuff. So.
Well, you said they can't conceive of the notion, but that's exactly what I say about the piloting aspect of this. The reason I feel, and not just me, others share this feeling too, that so many people fell for this story that these hijackers could have flown these airplanes. But for one, the government, the media told them, they go, oh, okay, well, that's what happened. But they cannot conceive of the absurdity of this ludicrous notion that these unqualified pilots flew the aircraft. And that's part of what our website's intending to do. We show a series of issues and then introduce them to the uninterruptible autopilot and say, which one do you think? We're not saying what actually happened. We're saying what could not have happened on 9/11, and that is the hijackers couldn't have flown the airplane. And we offer the uninterruptible autopilot as the only viable alternative explanation as to how 3 of the 4 airplanes struck buildings that day, supposedly. So, and we leave it up to. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We leave it up to the reader of the website to be the judge, and we think that they'll arrive at the same conclusions we did. So,
and I was going to say, this technology has been around for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. Quite some time.
Well, I want to go into remote control because we've got a whole page on the website dedicated to that. But yeah, you can go back over 75 years if you want to talk about remote control airplanes. But the other reason, the other thing we're doing, last August 2020, we talked about this, and I submitted an FAA whistleblower report via their hotline. And initially they were very receptive. I got a receipt, then had an FAA aeronautical engineer from Seattle contact me via email saying he wanted to set up a 3-way conference call with him the next day. So I came back on the email, maybe I shouldn't have because I scared him away, and hit him with a barrage of information on remote control, uninterruptible autopilots, and a number of issues, okay? And then I called him and we talked 10 minutes, and he's very tight-lipped. He didn't want to offer anything. But after that, he wouldn't respond to emails, phone calls, etc. So I contacted his boss in DC and said, hey, look, I was supposed to have this conversation. He's not talking to me. And she didn't respond to my email, but forwarded it to the full circle to the FAA hotline folks that I had submitted the original report to. So over the course of the next 14 months, we mainly submitted additional information and evidence, including these recorded conversations that we had with pilots. And they lied to us, and it was proven by a federal FOIA request that they had lied to us, that they hadn't really conducted an investigation. So that started the letter writing process up the chain of command to the FAA administrator, the Department of Transportation secretary, the inspector general, and ultimately I wrote a letter to Biden, also figuring I'm not going to hear anything there, but I wanted to establish a correspondence trail. But the last letter I sent went to the House of Representatives Government Oversight and Reform Committee, which deals with whistleblower cases. And I stated, hey, look, 14 months, they lied. We've got this evidence. They didn't interview pilots. I want you to conduct an investigation into this as to why they didn't conduct a thorough investigation of the greatest crime ever committed on American soil in American history, 9/11, a crime, incidentally, that's never been criminally investigated, which brings me to my next point is why we're exposing this. Well, it's not just for the 2,977 victims that died on 9/11, but also for the millions of Muslims and others who have died, been displaced or maimed in the Middle East and South Asia as a direct result of these lies of 9/11. And I really don't need to be out doing this. I'm 72 years old and it could be enjoy, but I know too much about 9/11 and the lies to remain silent. But
You're like a
most,
rooster. You see the sun and you can't stop crowing, man.
but we're asking for our day in court. We're asking for an independent investigation into this, which we are not optimistic that will never happen, because the 9/11 Commission, even though it wasn't a criminal investigation, wouldn't have even happened had it not been for the next of kin. They start petitioning Bush. 14 months later, they went, oh, okay, I guess we'll appease them and have a 9/11 Commission. Well, the chairman of the 9/11 Commission admitted afterwards it was set up to fail, underfunded and time constrained, and other people on the commission agreed with him. But the next of kin submitted a series of questions they wanted answered, and 70% of them went unanswered.
Well, and I also heard about the commission as well. There was one statistic that really shocked me. They allowed one pilot, I believe, and one pilot only to speak. And if you want to go into that, I don't know if you can speak on that, but.
Well, that's the other reason we're interviewing pilots. And it's really like pulling teeth to get pilots come out, because some of them say, well, it's 20 years ago, I don't want to talk about it. Others are afraid because they're still employed and say, I don't want to get involved with this. But we did manage to get a group of pilots, and we profiled 10 of their interviews that I conducted with them on the pilot interview page of the website. So
Nice.
the government has seen them. And we specifically asked, what experience do these hijackers lack to make it impossible for them to have flown the profile? So they go into great detail, something the 9/11 Commission should have heard, explaining how it was impossible for them to have flown these complex maneuvers given their lack of experience. So if I could, I'll quickly go over. I don't know how much time you want to spend, Adam, but
Oh, good.
Okay. I'll go over the rest of the pages on the 911pilots.org website. Up at the top of the page, there's an About Dan Hanley page, and it pretty much profiles me and what happened to me in 2003 with my grounding and why we're doing what we're doing. But there's two films at the bottom of the page. They're only 3 minutes long, but a Malaysian TV channel contacted me last year and asked me if I'd do interviews on this uninterruptible autopilot system, to which I agreed to do. So in 3 minutes, I was able to cover a lot, but it goes into explaining where we stand with regard to this system. And then this is important, up there at the top of the website, there's a Join Us page, and it's real simple. All we need is your name and email address. And there's a comments box there, and we're asking that if you're a pilot, put in the type aircraft you've flown, and we'll get in touch with you. But it's also open to the general public, or if you're a media personnel and would like to interview me or somebody in our group, you can just drop a note there, because we check them every day and we'll get in touch with you. But that's the Join Us page. And then we're not money grubbers trying to capitalize on 9/11, but we do have a donate page, because we do have overhead expenses like website development. We can pay a salary there to an individual that's created our website, flyers that I'll explain, and other incidentals. And thus far, a lot of it's been coming out of our pocket, and our wives are complaining. So that's there. But now we get into 4 pages where we try to discredit the hijackers. And the first one is the aircraft page. And when you click on that, it opens up and it's got a Cessna 172 photo and compared to a 767. Now, we don't have the dimensions there, but the Cessna is 27 feet long, the Boeing 767, 170 feet long. You're talking about a 100-knot airplane compared to a 500-knot airplane, and a 1-ton airplane versus a 100-ton airplane. And what we're saying is, to draw a comparison here so people might understand, just because you can drive your family car doesn't mean that, say you've had your license for 15 months like these guys did, doesn't mean you can hop in a semi-tractor trailer get it up to a high speed and drive it through a garage without scraping the side of the truck, because that's how precise they would have had to been to hit these buildings. And also, it'd be like driving a Formula 4 race car. Driven before and get up to a high speed. So these guys couldn't have flown these airplanes. And we go on to do a comparison of the cockpits, the second tab down. And there you look at a Cessna 172 aircraft with its old round pneumatic dial instruments, a few switches and knobs, but basically a very, very simple cockpit. And we contrast that with the 767 that has a myriad of they got the electronic flight instrument display system. They've got a flight management computer there that you have to input information by this control display unit. They would be clueless. So we asked, how did they get from the point of hijacking to their targets navigating this airplane? It would be impossible for them to do. So that's what that page is all about, just showing another example of why it was impossible. Now, this next page is called hijackers. Okay, I'm going to call it up on my, we profiled the 3 hijackers that supposedly flew the airplanes that hit buildings that day. And we cover Mohammed Atta that hit the North Tower and Marvin El-Shehi that hit the South Tower. And we explained to him, like, an example is Marvin El-Shehi, the one that hit the South Tower. It was the fastest airplane at all, doing almost 600 miles an hour. And 12 seconds prior to impact, he rolls the airplane, the airplane's rolled into a 30-degree bank. And had that not occurred at precisely that time with that angle of bank, the aircraft would have missed the target by 800 feet. So we're saying, look, that's a tiny, they look like they were big buildings, but it's really a tiny sliver of glass, concrete and steel, that you'd have to be if you're a few degrees off the heading at that closure rate and speed, that would be very difficult to accomplish. But Hani Hanjour, the guy we mentioned before that hit the Pentagon, we got a whole bunch of notes down there on him. And we mentioned about, he says in January 2001, Arizona flight tech school manager reported to the FAA at least 5 times because his English was inadequate for a commercial pilot certificate. It took him 5 hours to complete an oral exam, meant to last just 2 hours, okay? And we talked about him being denied rental of the airplane. But it says, according to the 9/11 Commission, Hanjour began his training in earnest, but in reality, while at this jet tech flight school, Hanjour never finished the coursework required to get a certificate or be able to fly a single engine airplane. But it goes on about the New York Times, ABC, the Chicago Tribune, and what they reported on this guy's inability to fly an airplane. And hang on, I got to come back on. Here I am.
Even his own family went so far as saying that there's no way he could have done this. I mean, I don't know if they're just trying to defend their family members, but they swore. I read an interview with his brother. They said there's just no way.
Well, he's the smoking gun. The other 2, you could try to argue that, hey, that wasn't different. I mean, some people come to me and say, hey, look, all they got to do is fly Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I go, no. It's a bit different flying a 100-ton airplane at that speed, trying to hit those targets. And so I don't really get into debates anymore with people that aren't pilots, because they can't relate to what we're trying to say. But after the hijackers page on the website is the pilot interview page. And we've profiled 10 pilots. Some of them most of them are military and civilian, but they're all highly qualified with the exception of one guy that we interviewed. We wanted to go to the other end of the spectrum and interview a low-time pilot to hear what he had to say. So go to those interviews and share them on your favorite social media outlet. And lastly is this remote control page, which is real important, because we've tried to show you the hijackers couldn't have flown the airplane, and this we offer as a viable alternative explanation as to how they hit the target. And you go to this page, and at the top, we talk about remote control aircraft technology has been around since 1944. And over 75 years ago, when at the end of World War II, they gutted out Boeing, I think that, I mean, B-24s or 17s, and loaded them with a highly incendiary compound called Torpex. And pilots were required to make takeoff, but once they got airborne, they bailed out. And these airplanes were remotely guided to targets in Europe. Now, this was over 75 years ago. And then we mentioned we got a short video there that Joe Kennedy, JFK's older brother, was actually killed on one of these missions when the airplane blew up before he could bail out. But we could list a whole series of remote control airplanes, but we don't go into it. We just cite two examples here. And the second one being 40 years later in 1944. Now imagine the technology advancements over a 40-year period here, especially with the advent of the computer age. They took a 4-engine commercial jet aircraft, a Boeing 720, loaded it with crash dummies and cameras. And what they wanted to do was test crew and passenger survivability in the event of a crash landing. Now they took this airplane off by remote control, flew it around the pattern, auto landing it 6 times before they intentionally crash landed it on the final approach. And that's what the video shows, is the crash landing, but that airplane you see in the video is being remotely controlled. So now when you jump up to the mid-90s, okay, proof that this uninterruptible autopilot exists, this system that allows a remote source to take control of an aircraft, is given by a Wikipedia article, if you want to give that much credence to Wikipedia. But it states the purpose of the system was to prevent would-be hijackers from commandeering a commercial jet aircraft by remotely taking control of it and auto landing it somewhere. But it's misleading in that they say Boeing patented this in 2006 after 9/11. Okay, that's true, but we've got a patent on the thing that shows 2006 this thing was developed, but we've got an audio recording. It's done by Rob Balsamo, the late Rob Balsamo, who is the founder of Pilots for 9/11 Truth, and he's conducting an interview of an avionics technician named Wayne Anderson. And during this interview, Wayne explains that between late 96, early 97, they brought an airplane, a 757, into a hangar to bench test the autopilot, okay? And a man went into maintenance control with a laptop, and they had a walkie-talkie between the cockpit and this man. And they were doing this test, and he said, engage the autopilot, and he took control of everything. Okay, now there's one way of engaging an autopilot, turn the switch on, okay? There's 4 ways of disengaging it. Turn the switch back off, or there's a little red button on the yoke or the steering wheel you press, that'll disengage it. Or if you apply a 70-pound force or greater on the yoke, that would disengage the autopilot. Or if you pull the circuit breaker on the system, well, they pulled every single circuit breaker on the system, and they couldn't override this airplane in any of those ways. It's backdoored and has its own power supply, and they were along for the ride. They were pretty upset seeing this, but that interview alone is proof positive that the system was developed and existed and even installed on this one aircraft in 96, 97, prior to 9/11. So it's our contention that it was in fact used to remotely guide aircraft to targets. And at the bottom of that page, we say, was it the hijackers or the remote control system? You be the judge. So
Wow.
anyhow, the latest thing we're doing here is, you mentioned I live in Islamabad, Pakistan. Most people probably don't realize that Pakistan's the 6th most populous country in the world. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. It's got 230 million people.
Wow.
And 96 to 98% of them are Muslims. So what they've got here, what the government's dealing with, is a stonewall 9/11 pilot whistleblower living amongst 200 million Muslims saying there was no airplane, no hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft. And just September 9th, I got on my first national TV program here.
Good for
I had
you.
my wife's a news anchor at a big station here, and she knew the CEO of the station. I got on, called him, said, "Can you do a program on 9/11 and put Dan on?" And he said, "Sure." So I got on that, and I'm actively trying to get on other stations here, as well as say Press TV in Iran, and RT in Moscow. But there's other stations as well. But the other thing we've done is, I wish I could show it to you on the screen, but we've created a flyer that's both in English and in Urdu, the national language here. And we're distributing them amongst the people over here. And we've noted just with the number that we've distributed so far, we can look at our Google Analytics on our website and see Pakistan's popped up in number 2 in position with all the other countries in the world that's reading it. So we're going to continue with that program. We go outside of mosques and TV stations and distribute these things. So we're getting, I mean, initially, I mean, it says in big red letters there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft at the top of this thing. And then it goes into what we normally say, what happened there. And there's a lot of disbelievers initially, because the first time I tried this was outside of a mosque, and they were going to run me off, but I talked to the imam and he said, "Go ahead, you can distribute them." But I wound up immediately surrounded by about 50 people. I don't know how many of them could speak English, but it was sort of almost like a press conference. And there are all these hands coming at me, and I'm handing out all these flyers. I go, "Boy, this is great," you know. So they were asking very pointed questions, but you know, distributing, I just had 1,000 flyers more, and it's not really that cheap printing these things. That's why we got a donate button, among other things. But we're getting other volunteers came up, say, "Hey, how can I help you?" They speak English, right? "I want to be able to help you." And I said, "Print copies of the flyer and pass it out to family, friends, and neighbors." And I've got my email address on them. That might be a mistake, but and I haven't gotten contacted by anyone, but we're trying to develop a 9/11 truth movement in a massively predominant Muslim country in South Asia. And
There's
hope,
Go ahead.
pardon?
Oh, go ahead. I'll say it in a minute. Go ahead.
In hopes that it will spread across the Muslim world. And that's our target audience. There's 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, okay? Besides the next of kin and the victims of 9/11, they were most wrong by the lies of 9/11. Because over the last 20 years, the Prophet Muhammad's been smeared, the Quran desecrated, Islam demonized, and Muslims have been persecuted for a crime Muslims did not commit. Yeah. So that's our message. People are saying to me, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Well, we're trying to push for a public hearing of some kind, but we're really trying to get our message spread across the Muslim world that these hijackers didn't do this, that it was a system that nobody knows about." Even when we interview these pilots, we have to brief them on the uninterruptible autopilot system. Nobody knows about it out there.
Really?
Initially they disbelieve. We go, "No," when we give them all the examples of how we know it existed. I had I couldn't discern whether it was a man or a woman, got a hold of me on Twitter, who went by the name Captain, I won't mention the last name, but I didn't know. It turned out the person was a police captain, not an airline captain. That's what intrigued me when he started conversing with me. But it turned out when he left the police force, he went to work for Raytheon and had further proof that the system was out there, right? Well, right when I was going to get all this information, the person got cold feet and ran away from me. So, told me that they had been stalked and that actually moved away from his or her family for a couple of years just to protect them. So there's another Boeing whistleblower that knows about the system that doesn't wants to remain anonymous and doesn't want to speak out. So people are afraid because, Adam, you'll agree with me, you're living in a police state there.
100%. And I tell people all the time, the Patriot Act was the shackles. That was the shackles.
And we got the NSA wiretaps that are illegal, and we've got Homeland Security, the Gestapo. People are afraid, including my four sisters that live there. They don't even want to have anything to do with me. They're afraid that the cops are going to come in, or the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force kick their door down, take their computer, and label them a domestic terrorist. So everybody's walking a thin line and doesn't want to get involved. But and then people say to me, "Yeah, well, you're 6,000 to 8,000 miles away from the United States, living over there, Dan." And I go, "Give me a break. This place is crawling with CIA, Mossad, Indian Raw, MI6, you name it. And it only costs about $50 to have somebody killed over here. So the reason I don't think I'm a threat yet is because I'm still alive. If they wanted me dead, they would have done it. So.
Well, I'll tell you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna point out Philip Marshall, if you're familiar with him. Captain Philip Marshall was a 767 captain at United Airlines and had written 2 books about 9/11, was about to publish a third one. He told his neighbors he was being threatened. And the neighbors found his family dog and 2 kids shot to death and him with a bullet in the head, and the police deemed it murder-suicide.
Yeah, about a year ago is when I started my journey, and that was a question that I had to sit in presence with for quite some time. And I'm sure you've had to do the same. You know, what does this truly mean to you?
Right.
We can always get more money. We can always get another job. You know, some of us have lost friends and family members that most of the time can't be replaced. But, you know, eventually I just came to the conclusion that, you know, this is something that I cannot avoid. And that ultimately I can't get to the end of my days and look in the mirror. I wouldn't be able to look in the mirror knowing what I know. At this point, I almost feel like I'm responsible to bring this information at all costs, especially because, you know, there's nobody from the Pentagon that has come forth that was there, that spent 240 hours on site, that has the experience with parts, including all the other things that have started to accumulate as I began this journey. But yeah, I like I said, I've got nothing but respect for you, man. You know, especially just all the things you've had to deal with that I haven't had to deal with as a whistleblower. And that, you know, just know that I really do believe with all my heart, crossing over into a spiritual side of this, that we're here for this reason. We're here to do this. And so I just, I thank you and I applaud you, man. And, you know, I
thank you for what you're doing, Adam.
Yeah. And eventually I asked myself, you know, at the very end of it, you know, when I finally started to really feel comfortable, it was when I started to meet with people like you, and I started to look at other people out there that are devoted to, you know, telling their story or spreading truth. And, you know, those people are still around. They're still with us. You know, I look at people like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange and all these other guys, and I'm like, ooh, you know, do I want to risk this? But yeah, you know, I have yet to feel at any moment truly threatened, but that's going to change here pretty soon. I feel like when I really go after Lee Wheelbarger, that could change a little bit. I have no idea. He has done some pretty crazy things when it comes to just stories I've heard. People have given interviews about the way he responds to people that challenge his credibility or challenge him. But, you know, I don't know. When it comes to this, you know, you just got to wear the armor and just have faith and just keep going. And, you know, eventually the truth always shines, man. Darkness cannot exist in the presence of light. That's just what I tell myself. So.
Yeah, that keeps me going too, Adam.
Yeah.
You know, I get frustrated. You know, I'm not surprised I get the response or lack thereof from the government on any of this.
Well,
they know I'm over here. They know I'm over here doing and saying what I'm doing because I tell them. And I've gone into when I come in the United States or leave, I'm interrogated by the FBI and TSA.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, I'll make this quick because we've been kind of over time here. But 2 years ago, we were going to go to the United States, my wife and I. We hadn't been there for a while. And the very day I made reservations on Qatar Airways through Doha to Atlanta, the FBI in Washington, D.C. called my ex-wife and wanted to know everything about my trip. And I go, wow, how did they even know I was coming, right? So I called the FBI and say, hey, what's up? And they wanted to know how I knew that. And I told them. So they wouldn't tell me anything. So I said to my wife, watch it, something's going to happen. And sure enough, when we got into the customs hall in Atlanta, she went over to the foreigners line. I'm in the domestic. And she was escorted over by a man and a woman who introduced themselves. And one of them was an FBI agent, another one was a TSIA agent. Asked me if I had time for questions. I go, sure. So they took us over to a desk that didn't have a line, said, here, stamp their passports. And when the immigration officer got on the computer looking at me, he said to the FBI agent, you know this guy's red, don't you? I go, yeah, we know. I didn't ask what that meant, but I didn't think it was anything good, right? So I thought they took us in a room, wanted to know everything about where I was going to be, contact numbers, etc. And I thought that was the end of it. But a month later, mind you, we're coming through security, just cleared security at Atlanta, walking out in this busy concourse. Now, mind you, they knew what flight I was on, knew what I looked like. Okay, were waiting for me. They walked up behind me in the concourse. And again, an FBI agent, TSA agent saying, do you have time for questions? We got there early. I go, sure. So they took us in a room this time, closed the door. And the first thing the FBI agent did after he showed me his badge was, look, we respect we thank you for your 10 years of service in the military and respect your First Amendment freedom of speech rights, but have you ever been threatened? I said, no, why should I be concerned about that? He's, well, yeah, we're just curious as to whether or not you were. Well, at that point in time, I didn't know that they were on my side or the bad guy's side. But it turned out after a half hour, they knew everything about me. They knew what I posted on Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And my wife buried her head in her lap, laughing, saying, he posts on Facebook, he's harmless. So
Well,
I said, hon, let them do their job. Okay, they were just sent down here to ask questions. So
yeah,
I
it's
know.
gonna be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
I was going to say it's going to be really interesting. There's several different kind of markers that I have, and really going after Lee Wheelbarger is the first one. But there will come a point in time where I demand answers from the FBI, and I don't know if that's foolish of me, but I am going to bring up all the confiscated videotapes that have yet to be released. The evidence, and I can say this as a credible expert because I used to inspect airplane parts. And every single one of those parts that you can find online has absolutely no, especially the ones that are out there in the lawn, have no fire damage whatsoever, no markings of fire damage. They're all mangled, but absolutely no, at least indicators of fire. But the FBI was all over, all over that scene. And, I'm going to start calling them out. And I'm really interested to see how they're going to respond. I guess you could say, I run marathons now. I'm a marathon runner. I've been training for about a year and a half. I tell people I love the athleticism. I like to stay in shape. It gives me the opportunity to eat whatever I want. But I also am a runner because I don't know who in the hell is going to show up at my front door wanting to take me somewhere. And so, yeah, I jokingly say it, but in all my talks, a lot of them at least, I've been like, hey, law enforcement, call ahead. Because I don't trust you. I make no bones about it. I don't trust you. So call ahead because I'm a runner. But I say that joke. I would happily go along with whatever as long as I had an attorney present. But I don't trust that organization any further than I can throw them. So
I don't either. If we got time, I'll explain real quick what happened in 2006. The Chicago millionaire contacts me. And what he had done, United had been in bankruptcy, okay? And he had proof that the bankruptcy judge not only was mobbed up, but maintained a $40 million bribery fund in Chicago and then a bank up in Cicero. So he said to me, look, I've got this information. We got mob informants, involves the mafia. Would you join me, because I had a following at United, in trying to expose this judge that had 3 other federal judges. He was a federal judge and 6 state court judges. Well, I gulped, and I went, yeah, but my intent was to turn this over to the unions. Well, they wouldn't have anything to do with it, and I'll make it short. And I spent 5 years letter writing on that. And I went to every level and branch of government and look, I sent an affidavit that didn't have the names there because it would get me killed. But it was this affidavit that this friend of mine, Michael Lynch, the millionaire, had written up. And no one would do anything. I even got a hold of Obama's special assistant in Chicago, a woman named Joan Curry Leonard, and say, hey, look, we got all this information. She goes, you're going to have to go to your home state U.S. senator and representative. I go, what the hell? So I finally decided to get the FBI involved. This is why I'm telling you. I filed a federal complaint and flew to Chicago from Atlanta, rented a car and drove down the office, and I had a 164 meg external hard drive that had all this information and evidence on it that would have nailed these guys. And I was brought in a room and a woman sat on the other side with the glass partition. And I said, look, and I couldn't bring the hard drive in. They put it in a locker outside, gave me a key and said, if they wanted, here's the key, give it to them, they'll come out and retrieve it. So I'm talking to this woman and I said, look, I've got evidence on an external hard drive out there. Here's the key. And she slid it back under the glass. She goes, no, we don't want to look at that. I said, well, I've got a list of witnesses here, minus the mob informants, that I would like the FBI to interrogate. She slid it back under the glass and I slid it back to her and she would, plus I said, can I speak to the white collar criminal division? She goes, no. I said, well, I know he's busy. Can I speak to the FBI special agent in charge, Robert Grant? She goes, no. And then she looks at me and goes, Mr. Hanley, the Department of Justice has read all your letters and reviewed the information you provided, and they're not going to investigate this crime. This conversation's ended. And she got up and walked out of the room on me. So I'm sitting there with my jaw on the table, and Michael Lynch called me right afterwards, thinking I was going to get whacked, and said to me, you've been marginalized. They're not going to talk to you anymore. So that was about the time. I went on about another year after that, trying to get the Atlanta FBI, get it out of Chicago and everything. But all I'm saying, Adam, is if you're going to implicate the Justice Department, they're totally compromising corrupt. Okay,
Yeah.
you got to take my word for it from my 5-year experience. But that would be the route to go. File a federal complaint.
Yeah.
And bring in the evidence you have and see if they'll look at it.
Yeah.
The other alternative is to get with the lawyers committee and let them do it.
Yeah. And again, I would love an introduction, even if not even an introduction, if you just had some names and contacts, I'll run with it from there. So that would be great.
Okay. Well, I know the whole board of directors and I've got all their email addresses, so I'll get them to you.
You're awesome. I appreciate it.
I'm not awesome, but thanks.
Well, I'm gonna jump off here. I've got to go run 7 miles, and then I've got to link up with one of my buddies. He just came in from out of town. Totally surprised. Just kind of had to drop some things off, and he said, "You want to go out for a drink?" I said, "Yes." But this has been a treat, and I can't stress to you enough just how much respect I have for you and how thankful I am that we were here to share this space. And I would love to keep doing this. I would love to continue, talking, because this is only a fraction. And if anybody goes to Dan's social media, you can see other videos. I mean, we've just scratched the surface, and he's out there. He's putting himself out there a lot. And, I can't, like I said before we got, live and started recording this, I can't stress to you guys enough, the paradigm will shift. There's a lot of people out there. And so I highly encourage anybody who's watching this to please go check out everything that this man has to offer on social media and share it. That's the most important thing. You guys, we can talk all we want, but we have to share this stuff. And so again, I just want to say thanks to Captain Dan Hanley. You're a hero, brother. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on, Adam. I appreciate it. And real quick, my Twitter handle is Dan Hanley 4, and I'm on Facebook with my max limit of 5,000 friends at Dan Hanley. So if you want to join me there, I'm very outspoken. So thank you again.
I saw you had that limit. So I was going to jokingly say, get rid of one person. I'm joking. All right, my friend, until next time, thanks again. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, just reach out.
Thank you, Adam.
Yes, sir.